Healthy Lifestyle Crib presents How I Dupe My Brain into Enjoying Difficult Tasks. You probably have no trouble using your phone for entertainment purposes, such as playing games or checking social media. As a matter of fact, I have no doubt that you could sit in front of a screen and accomplish both of those things for 2 hours or more without becoming distracted once. Isn't it possible to devote half an hour to studying instead? Perhaps that's too challenging. Would you like to spend another hour working on your side project? I'm not sure I'd want to try that. You know that spending your time studying, working out, or creating a business will benefit you more in the long run, yet you still choose to do those things instead of reading, writing, or using social media. Some might say it's clear to see why. One task doesn't call for much time or energy on your part, while the other is challenging and will test your willpower. Some people don't have difficulties studying, working out, or pursuing hobbies regularly. Thus, the question arises as to why certain people have a greater drive to take on challenges. Furthermore, is there a method that might make challenging tasks simple to complete? Dopamine, a chemical in the brain, holds the key to understanding this phenomenon. It's common knowledge that dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter. However, it isn't exactly what happens. The chemical dopamine is responsible for our desire. Ultimately, it is this yearning that propels us to act. If you're still skeptical of dopamine's potency, I'll fill you in on certain mice trials conducted by neuroscientists. Electrodes were surgically inserted in the mice brains by the research team. Researchers triggered the mice brain's reward system whenever the rodent pulled a lever. As a result, the mice cravings intensified to the point that they repeatedly pulled the lever for long periods of time. The mice would stop eating and sleeping. It's likely that they'd keep pressing the lever until they passed out from tiredness. The steps were then taken backwards. In the study, scientists inhibited dopamine release in the brain's reward circuit. Because of this, white mice got so sluggish that they didn't bother rising up to obtain a drink of water. They simply refused to eat. No mating was desired on their part. There was nothing they yearned for. They have no more will to live, if you will. The mice would still consume and enjoy the food if it were presented to them in a more traditional manner, namely by having it placed directly in their mouths. They lacked the initiative to get up and do it on their own. You could assume that we go in search of food and water because we are hungry or thirsty. Dopamine, however, also plays an important part. Those mice studies may represent extremes. However, similar effects of dopamine in humans and our daily lives can be observed. In reality, your brain makes decisions in significant part because of the dopamine it anticipates receiving. A lack of dopamine from an endeavor makes it less appealing to pursue. But if doing something gives you a rush of dopamine, you'll want to keep doing it. So, what kinds of activities cause a surge of dopamine? Expecting something to pay off in some way triggers it. However, the brain won't let go of the activity if you realize there are no immediate benefits to it. Dopamine is released in the brain before eating comfort food because you know it will make you feel good, in spite of how it may make you feel. This is due to the fact that your brain is completely unconcerned about the negative effects of the surge in dopamine activity. Only more of it will do. A drug addict fits the traditional profile of such a person. The harm he's bringing to himself is obvious to him. The only thing on his mind is getting more of that drugs. Cocaine and heroin can make you euphoric and stimulate dopamine, which enhances the desire to use them. Of course, it's important to remember that almost everything also gives off a little bit of dopamine. So does anything as simple as quenching your thirst with water. However, the greatest amount of dopamine is produced after receiving a reward unexpectedly. This includes casino slot machine play. If you've been losing money, expecting a bigger return is normal. This might happen anytime. Today's digital environment saturates our brains with dopamine. Social media, video games, pornography, etc., can produce dopamine. All of these actions hope for a positive consequence. So, we're always on our phones. Expect a message, perhaps through text. We'll get it. We're like mice pressing the lever for dopamine. So what? It's not like I'm hurting. Incorrect. Homeostasis is a biological system that keeps our bodies stable. What this means is that our bodies prefer neutral physical and chemical environments within. When there is a change in our balance, our bodies have to adjust. As an illustration, let's consider how our body temperatures change in response to the cold. This causes the body to shiver in an effort to raise its core temperature. However, our inside temperature rises while it's hot outdoors. And so we perspire to cool off a bit. As a general rule, the human body strives to keep its internal temperature at about 37 degrees Celsius. On the other hand, Homeostasis might also show up in a different form. This is achieved through tolerance. To give just one example, someone who rarely consumes alcohol will become intoxicated very quickly when they do. A habitual drinker's body develops a tolerance to alcohol and needs more to get high. They're less sensitive to alcohol, therefore it takes more to intoxicate them. Dopamine isn't much different in that respect. In an effort to keep things steady, your body turns down the volume on your dopamine receptors. The brain eventually adjusts to the elevated dopamine levels and they become the new norm. Tolerance to the effects of dopamine follows. This is a severe issue since you may lose interest in activities that once captivated you. Doing things is even harder. Dopamine-deficient things are less stimulating and pleasurable. People would rather play video games or surf the web than read or work on their businesses. Video games release a lot of dopamine, which is relaxing. Reading and exertion generate little. Former addicts typically struggle to reintegrate into society. Their dopamine tolerance is unsustainable. Without dopamine, they lose all motivation, like the test mice. Not only druggies. Those addicted to electronic games, social networking, or internet porn have the same problem. More dopamine makes low dopamine tasks less enjoyable. All this raises the question, can this be avoided? Dopamine detox is necessary. Dopamine withdrawal symptoms may be familiar. You're going to take one day and completely unplug from all stimulation. Stop oversaturating your brain with dopamine and give your receptors a rest. If you're addicted to drugs, it's best to get professional help because you've likely built a physical and mental tolerance. Also, I'd hate for you to go through severe withdrawal. It's time to get back to the detox process. Your mission for today is to have as little enjoyment as humanly possible for 24 hours. You're not allowed to use any electronic devices, including the internet. No music, masturbation, or fast food is allowed. For the duration of the day, you're going to deprive yourself of any and all external pleasures. That's right, you're going to welcome your newfound boredom. There will be a lot of boredom, believe me. In any case, you're free to perform the following. Get some fresh air and go for a stroll. Get some quiet time to yourself and meditate. Think about where you're at and where you want to go. Jot down any thoughts that come to mind. A tangible piece of paper, as opposed to a digital file on your computer or mobile device. This may all seem quite severe. However, the capability to take drastic action is essential if you want radical results quickly. You may be wondering why on earth that would be effective right now. This is one way of looking at it. Suppose you've been treating yourself to a dinner at the finest eatery in town every day. This led to your previously exceptional dinners becoming the standard. You probably wouldn't accept a bowl of white rice if someone offered it to you. It wouldn't have the same quality as the food you get at a restaurant. That bowl of plain rice might not look so horrible if you were suddenly stuck on an uninhabited island and starving. In this way, the dopamine detox serves its purpose. By robbing you of your normal sources of enjoyment, it elevates the appeal of things that provide less satisfaction. Boredom is the key to the success of dopamine detox because it makes even the most ordinary activities enjoyable again. If you'd rather not completely deprive oneself of pleasure, a milder type of dopamine detox can be carried out. Select a day of the week in which you will entirely abstain from engaging in a behavior that produces a high level of dopamine. No matter what that action is. There are plenty of ways to waste time, like checking your phone, playing computer games, watching TV marathons, eating junk food, and seeing porn online. And from now on, you will refrain from doing that for an entire day once a week. You're free to engage in other activities, but the one you've selected cannot be done. Maybe you'll feel a little bored, but that's the goal. To counteract the excessive levels of dopamine in your brain, you need give your dopamine receptors some time to rest and rejuvenate. And that day's boredom will drive you to seek out other activities. Activities that you might otherwise avoid because they don't provide the same rush of pleasure. And since you're bored, carrying them out is less of a challenge. There is little doubt that avoiding high dopamine activity on sometimes is beneficial. However, you should try to abstain from doing those things as much as possible. Instead, you should strengthen the neural pathways that link the feeling of dopamine to outcomes that are in your best interest. Engaging in high dopamine activities can drive you to maintain doing great things in the long run. You can use your enhanced dopamine activity as a motivator to push through challenging tasks. Indeed, this is how I conduct my own life. I keep a log of all the challenging, low dopamine tasks I complete. Doing chores around the flat, playing the piano, reading books, working out, making films, etc. The amount of work I can complete each day impacts what high dopamine activity I do as a reward at the end of the day. After and at the end of the day are the vital terms here. Doing the low dopamine work won't be appealing if I first engage in the high dopamine behavior. No amount of encouragement could ever inspire me to do it. This is why I tackle the hardest chores first and then indulge in dopamine-releasing hobbies. I give myself 15 minutes of high dopamine behavior for every hour of low dopamine work. This implies I allow myself 2 hours of high dopamine activities for every 8 low dopamine ones. As expected, they are my own proportions. You have some leeway in adjusting them to your needs. It's important to remember that rewarding unhealthy habits is counterproductive if you're trying to break an addiction to them. Try to discover an alternative incentive that won't do as much harm. One you believe in enough to keep working toward it. And if you must know, my secret vice is surfing the web. I can waste a lot of time there just wandering around aimlessly. In fact, that's why I set up this method. My goal is to eventually be able to manage my addiction, so this is necessary. But make no mistake, I still schedule days where I do nothing that produces a high level of dopamine. At the end of this video, I'd want to stress that it's possible to make even the most challenging tasks seem less daunting. But when your brain is constantly flooded with dopamine, you won't have the same enthusiasm for tasks that don't provide a similar rush. Because of the high levels of dopamine they produce, activities such as using a computer or smartphone should be limited. And believe me when I say this, you won't regret it. If you're having trouble staying motivated, a dopamine detox is something you should look into right away. Keep your distance from the excessive doses of dopamine, or at least expose yourself to it much less frequently. Then, and only then, will routine, everyday tasks with low dopamine rewards start to feel rewarding again, allowing you to engage in them for longer. Each of us is a marginally functional dopamine junkie. That's great news, because the neurotransmitter dopamine drives us to succeed in our endeavors and grow as individuals. Your dopamine source is entirely up to you, though. Do you plan on obtaining it by means that put your interests at risk? Or are you planning on achieving it by focusing on the future? That's up to you to decide. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you'll show your appreciation by clicking the like button. This makes it possible for more people to start making their lives better. Thank you for watching.